You know that feeling when something's off, but you can't name it yet? That low hum in the back of your skull, that your brain keeps trying to file away as nothing. Stress, work, lack of sleep, anything but what it actually is? I had that feeling for about 3 weeks before everything fell apart. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I was 31 years old, I had a good job managing logistics for a mid-sized distribution company outside of Columbus, Ohio, and I was 8 months away from getting married to a woman I had loved since I was 24. I had a house with a mortgage I was proud of. I had a dog named Scout, who greeted me at the door every night. I had, by any reasonable measure, a life that was going exactly the way it was supposed to go. And I had a brother who I would have told you, right up until the moment I couldn't tell you anymore, was my best friend. His name was, look, I'll call him what he was to me. My brother. That's the only name he gets in this story now. He was 3 years older than me. He had always been the one our parents talked about at dinner. The one teachers remembered. Years after he'd left their class. The one who walked into rooms and immediately became the center of them. I was never jealous of that, not really. I loved him. That's the thing that makes all of this so hard to explain to people who haven't lived it. You can love someone completely and still have them destroy you. My fiancée, I'll call her what she was. My fiancée. Past tense. We had been together for 5 years. We met at a friend's birthday party in a bar in the short north. And she laughed at something I said and I thought, okay, that's it. That's the person. You know how it is when you just know? Or at least you think you know. I used to believe that gut feeling meant something. Now I think the gut can be fooled just as easily as anything else. She was smart. She was funny. She had this way of making everything feel slightly more interesting than it actually was. She worked in marketing for a healthcare company. She was close with my family, especially my mother, who had already started referring to her as a daughter in casual conversation. My brother had known her almost as long as I had. They got along well, they had similar tastes in music, similar sarcastic humor. I thought that was a good thing. I thought it meant she fit into my life seamlessly. I was a fool. The feeling started on a Tuesday in February. I had come home from work early because we'd finished a big inventory audit, ahead of schedule, and my boss told us to take the rest of the afternoon. I texted my fiancée on the way home. No response, which wasn't unusual. She could get buried in meetings. I texted my brother to ask if he wanted to grab dinner. No response from him either, which was also not unusual. I got home, fed Scout, changed out of my work clothes. I checked my phone, nothing. I don't know why I drove to my brother's apartment. I don't know what I thought I was doing. I think I was just restless. Just looking for something to do with myself on this unexpectedly free afternoon. And his place was only 10 minutes from mine. I was going to surprise him. Maybe pick up a six-pack on the way. Maybe order wings and watch something. That's the story I was writing in my head as I pulled into his parking lot. His car was there. And so was hers. I sat in my car for a long time. Long enough that the sun shifted. Long enough that the heat clicked off and I got cold and didn't notice until I realized my hands were stiff. I kept looking at her car. Her silver Civic with the cracked taillight she'd been meaning to get fixed for 6 months. I knew that car, the way you know your own shoes. I had driven that car. I had put gas in that car when she forgot her wallet. I had sat in the passenger seat of that car on the way to meet her parents for the first time. Trying not to look nervous. I called her. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called my brother. Same thing. I went upstairs. I knocked. There was a pause. Longer than there should have been for someone simply walking to a door, and then my brother opened it. He was still pulling on his t-shirt. He looked at my face and he didn't say anything. He just looked. She was on the couch. She had her shoes on, which struck me as the most surreal detail in the entire moment, like she'd put them on quickly but hadn't had time for anything else. She looked at me and she said my name. Just my name, once like a question. I didn't say anything either. I looked at both of them for what felt like a very long time. I looked at the apartment I had been in dozens of times, the couch I had sat on, the kitchen where I had eaten takeout with my brother on holidays when we were too lazy to drive to our parents' house. I looked at all of it, and then I left. I drove home. I sat in my driveway. Scout was watching me through the front window, his paws on the sill, his tail going. I watched him watch me for a while. I did not call my fiancée back that night. I did not call my brother. I went inside. I fed Scout again because I forgot I'd already fed him, and he wasn't going to correct me. And I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets. And I let myself understand what I had just seen. There is a particular kind of grief that comes from realizing that something you thought was one shape is actually a completely different shape. It's not just loss, it's a rearranging. Everything you thought you knew gets picked up and set back down in the wrong place. And you have to figure out how to navigate the new layout in the dark. That's what that night was. By the following morning, both of them had called me. Multiple times. My brother had also sent a text that said we need to talk, which I found to be a fairly remarkable understatement. My fiancée had sent a longer text, something I started to read and then put my phone face down on the counter and didn't pick back up for 3 hours. When I finally read it, it said that it had only happened a few times, that it meant nothing, that she loved me and wanted to fix things, that she was so sorry, that she knew there was no excuse, but please, could we just talk? I called my parents. This was my mistake, not the biggest mistake I made in this whole situation. That one came later. But a mistake nonetheless. I called my parents because they were my parents, and this was the worst thing that had ever happened to me, and I needed to tell someone who loved me. My mother answered. I told her what I had found. I told her calmly, I think. Or at least as calmly as I could manage. There was a long silence, and then she said, "Oh, honey. What happened in the following weeks is hard to explain to someone who grew up in a family that functions differently than mine does. My family has always organized itself around my brother. Not consciously, not maliciously, they would all deny it and I think they would believe the denial. But it's true. He was the first grandchild on both sides. He was the one who called home every Sunday. He was the one whose successes were announced at Thanksgiving, and whose struggles were treated as family emergencies. I was the reliable one. I was the one who handled things. I was the one who didn't need much. So when I told my parents what my brother had done, what I got back was not what I needed. What I got was complicated. My mother said she was devastated for me. She also said that she knew my brother was going through a hard time. He had been struggling since he got passed over for a promotion at work. Apparently, something he had told her and not told me. And that didn't excuse what he did. Of course it didn't. But she hoped I would try to understand that people make terrible choices when they're in pain. My father said less. He said it was a mess and he was sorry, and he hoped we could all get through it. He asked if there was any chance my fiancée and I could work things out. I told him I didn't know. Over the next 2 weeks, I found out that my parents had been in contact with my brother daily. I found out that my mother had also been in contact with my fiancée, who she still invited to Sunday dinner, though my fiancée had the sense to decline. I found out that my brother had spoken to my father privately and given him some version of events that I was not privy to, and that my father had described this conversation to a family friend as hearing both sides. Both sides. There is no both sides when one person has done something, and the other person has had it done to them. That's not how sides work. My younger cousin called me one night. She's the only one in my family I'll still talk to. And she told me that at a family dinner I hadn't attended, my parents and my brother had spent most of the meal discussing how to get me to agree to family counseling. The idea was that we would all sit down together, myself and my brother and possibly my fiancée, with a therapist, and work through it as a unit. I was not asked if I wanted this. I was the subject of a conversation I wasn't in, about a plan I hadn't agreed to, designed to make everyone else more comfortable with what had been done to me. That was when I made the decision. I know what everyone is going to say about what comes next, because people always have opinions about it. They say I was too extreme. They say families work things out. They say time heals things, that I would regret it, that blood is thicker than water. I heard all of it, but let me ask you something. If someone burns your house down, and then the people who are supposed to love you most spend their time figuring out how to make peace with the arsonist, do you keep showing up to their dinner table and pretending the house isn't ash? I called my mother. I told her what I had heard about the dinner, about the counseling plan. She didn't deny it. She said they were just trying to find a way forward, that it was painful for everyone, that she didn't want to lose either of her sons. I said, "You didn't lose me. You chose not to prioritize me. There's a difference." She started crying. I had never made my mother cry before, not like that, not with something I said to her deliberately. It felt terrible, it also felt necessary. I told her I needed space. I told her I didn't know how long. I told her I loved her, and that I hoped she understood, but that I couldn't keep showing up to a family that was treating what happened to me as a problem to be managed, rather than a wrong to be acknowledged. Then I did something that everyone who has ever watched one of these stories gets frustrated about. I told them I was moving. I know. In my defense, I had a legitimate reason. I had been offered a position. Our company's regional hub in Nashville 8 months earlier, and turned it down because of the wedding planning and the house. After everything fell apart, I called my manager and asked if the offer still stood. It did, with a bump in pay. I gave my notice on the house, handed Scout's leash to my cousin, who had been wanting a dog for 2 years, and I packed what I could fit into my truck. I told my parents I was going to Nashville because I thought, and this was naive. I understand that now, that giving them the information would be a gesture of good faith, that it would communicate that I wasn't disappearing, just creating distance, that it would show I still considered them family even if I needed to step back. What it actually did was give my brother my forwarding address. He showed up. I had been in Nashville for 6 weeks. I was renting a 2-bedroom place in East Nashville, still figuring out the city, still eating takeout 3 nights a week. Because I hadn't yet settled into the rhythm of grocery shopping for one person. I was doing okay. I won't oversell it. I was not doing great. I was doing okay, which at that point felt like a significant achievement. I came out of a coffee shop on a Saturday morning, and he was standing next to my truck. He looked tired. He had lost some weight. He had the expression of a person who had rehearsed something extensively, and was now very aware that the rehearsal was over. He said my name. I said, "I'm not doing this here." He said he just needed me to hear him out. That he'd driven 7 hours. That he was sorry. That he needed his brother back. And I want to be honest about what happened inside me in that moment. Because I think the honest version is more useful than the clean version. What happened was not that. I felt nothing. I felt a great deal. I felt the pull of 28 years of shared history. Of inside jokes. Of being the two of us against whatever was happening in our house growing up. Of him teaching me to drive in an empty mall parking lot on a Sunday. Of him calling me when he got his heart broken, at 22, and me driving 40 minutes at midnight to sit with him. I felt all of that. And I also felt, very clearly, that none of that history was an apology. That showing up was not the same as understanding. That 7 hours in a car could look like love, or could look like someone trying to resolve their own guilt. And that from where I was standing I could not tell the difference. I said, "I know you're sorry. I believe you're sorry. But sorry is about you feeling better, and I'm not in a position to be responsible for that right now." He said, "That wasn't fair." I said, "No. What happened to me wasn't fair. This is just a consequence." I walked to my truck and I left. He stood in the parking lot, and I did not look in the rearview mirror because I knew if I did, I would not be able to keep driving. I blocked his number that afternoon. I blocked my parents' numbers 2 days later when my mother called me to tell me I had been cruel. And that my brother was devastated. I want to stop here for a second, because I think this part matters. I did not feel righteous. I did not feel like I was winning something. I felt like I was walking through a fire that I hadn't started, and trying to get to the other side without letting it take me with it. Every single decision I made in those weeks was made from a place trying to survive something, not from a place of wanting to punish anyone. I think people sometimes hear these stories, and imagine the person in my position feeling some kind of cold power. I didn't feel that. I felt like I was barely holding myself together with both hands. But I also knew, and this is the part that's hard to explain but that I believe completely, that if I stayed, if I absorbed the empathy of what happened in the name of keeping the family together, I would lose myself in a way I couldn't recover from. Some things you can endure and come out the other side. Some things you endure and come out as a different, smaller version of yourself. I had watched it happen to people. I wasn't willing to let it happen to me. So I stayed in Nashville. The first year was the hardest. I won't lie about that. The holidays were brutal. Thanksgiving I worked a double at the warehouse, because volume was up and people were willing to take the extra pay. And I was grateful for the distraction. Christmas I drove out to see my cousin and her husband, and spent 3 days pretending I was fine, mostly succeeding. New Year's I watched the countdown alone in my apartment with a glass of something cheap, and cried for approximately 20 minutes and then went to bed. But by the second year something had shifted. Not healed, I don't think this is the kind of thing that heals entirely, but settled. The way a broken bone settles when it's been set right. I had built something in Nashville that was mine. I had friends I'd made through work, and through a recreational softball league I'd joined on a whim in the spring. I had a routine. I had found a good therapist. Which I mention not because it's a remarkable thing but because it made an enormous difference. And I think people underestimate how much it can matter to have someone in your corner who has no stake in the diagnosis and the outcome. I had also slowly and carefully started dating again. That part I'll keep mostly private. What I'll say is that it was slow. And it was harder than I expected. And there were several first dates that ended in nothing. And one thing that lasted a few months, and ended mutually and without drama, which felt like its own small miracle. And then, about 2.5 years after I moved to Nashville, I met someone who made me laugh on a Tuesday for no reason in particular. And I thought, okay, I haven't spoken to my brother in 3 years. I haven't spoken to my parents in 2.5. I got an email from my mother, about 18 months ago. She found my work address somehow, possibly through my cousin who, I think, felt guilty about it afterward. The email said she loved me, that she missed me, that she thought about me every day, that she wasn't sure she'd done the right things, and she was sorry for the part she'd gotten wrong. I read it 4 times. I wrote 3 different responses and deleted all of them. I didn't respond. Not because I don't believe she meant it. I think she meant every word. But an apology that comes 18 months late, after you've watched someone build themselves back up from rubble, lands differently than it would have landed when it mattered. It lands as something you have to figure out what to do with, and what I figured out was that I didn't have anything to say that would be kind and true at the same time. So I said nothing. My cousin tells me things. Sometimes. that my brother is still with my former fiancée. They're engaged now, which I found out and which produced in me something I can only describe as a very specific kind of tired. Not jealousy, not rage, just tired. That my parents are getting older. That my father has been having some health issues. That my mother asks about me. I hear all of this and I hold it. I don't know yet what I'll do with it. What I know is this. I am 34 years old. I live in a city I chose for myself. I have friends who know my actual story and still call me on my birthday. I have a woman who I love in a way that feels different from before. Not less, but more deliberate, more clear-eyed. Like I know what I'm agreeing to and I'm choosing it with both hands open. I have a life that is mine. I did not get that life by staying in a place that was consuming me in the name of family loyalty. I got it by making the hardest decision I have ever made, and then getting up every day and living with it. I'm not telling you what you should do. I'm not saying my way is the right way, or the only way. Every situation is different, every family is different. Every wound has its own specific shape. What I'm saying is that I survived mine. And that I am, on most days, genuinely okay. Some families protect the people who hurt you. Some families ask you to shrink yourself so that everyone else can be comfortable. Some families mean well and still get it deeply, fundamentally wrong. And some things, once broken, are better left as what they became. Not as evidence of what was lost, but as the reason you finally built something that was entirely, unshakably yours. Drop your city in the comments. I want to know where you're listening from.